folks, and welcome to the Modern Agile Show, episode 38. I am here with my friend David Bland. He's the founder of Precoil, has been in the Agile and Lean field for a long time. And this is his second appearance on the show. Very happy to have David on the occasion of his new book, Testing Business Ideas, co-authored. And that is a great accomplishment. Thanks for doing that for the community.
Yeah, it was kind of like therapy.
Yeah, how was that? So say more.
Just getting out of my head. I mean,
yeah.
It's just like you think about it for 10 years and then you spend a year writing.
Right, right. Yeah, well, it's a gorgeous book. So this is the kind of book that you buy. You don't get it on Kindle, in my opinion, because it's. You said you had several graphic designers helping?
Yeah, we had 3 designers and an illustrator all working on the book for quite some time. So props to Alan and Alex and all the folks at Strategizer, putting those resources behind it too. It was a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah, it shows because it's beautifully designed and really visual, and it doesn't overwhelm you with tiny print on words, right? It's got a nice balance. So,
yep.
Props to you on that. Well, wonderful. What was it like writing the book?
It was interesting. It's a very steep learning curve for me. I'd stalled out on a couple other books in the past, and then when Alex reached out to me and said we should do this because there's a need in the community for it, he didn't really have to convince me. It was just more of, well, how do we work together? Because he's in Switzerland, I'm out here in the Bay Area. Our lead designer's in Toronto, Canada, and
wow.
So it was very much like, how does this work? And it was a lot of sticky notes in person, and then us, writing from afar and sharing virtually. So, but it was great. I mean,
yeah,
it's not like we were far apart on principles of why to do this. It was more of just the flow and making sure it's an easily consumable book.
Wonderful. So it's called Testing Business Ideas, and there are 44 experiments in here that you can use. It's like a textbook almost.
It's got a textbook vibe for it. It's certainly a book we wanted people to come back to and then reference, and that was the whole point. Is like have it be like a field guide.
So you could look through a catalog of ways to experiment and find what might fit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I'm going to work with teams, they do surveys, interviews, maybe a landing page, and that's kind of it. And so it's like, no, there's all these other things that can help you address your risk.
Yeah.
And so there's like 200 pages of experiments in there. So
wow.
This is one of the reasons we wrote it. It's like, how do you navigate that and give people more options?
Yeah, I see this Wizard of Oz, explainer video, buy a feature. Yeah, wonderful. Lots of stuff. So you have been applying these ideas for years, but consolidating a book is really valuable. Are there any stories that stand out to you of where testing ideas really helped a company?
Yeah, there are kind of 2 different types of stories I see time and time again. One is a startup where uncertainty's really extreme, and they're trying to figure out, is this something I do full time? It might be a side project, it might be something where you and your co-founder are trying to just figure it out. And so one of the stories we have in the book is a startup out here in San Francisco, which is Topology, where they literally like scan your face with the phone and then make glasses to measure your face, like exactly customized to your face.
Wow.
It's a pretty cool startup. But that aside, people don't trust it. They don't trust that it'll scan your face properly. They don't trust that glasses will fit. There's like a desirability risk there, even though it works. And so some of the things they did is like in the book, they did a bunch of pop-up stores. So they would run a pop-up store in downtown San Francisco. They would intercept people wearing glasses on the street, ask them like, do these fit well? Why? Why not? Do you understand why they don't fit well? They could walk people that really had the issue like into the store and show them what they do. And they were able to pre-sale some. They were able to get some great qualitative feedback from people. It was,
wow.
It's really, but they ran a series of those pop-up stores, and then they used all the notes like in their landing page and their marketing material, and they started to really test out, what would make or break this company, because if people don't believe your tech works, that's a really frustrating point, spot to be in.
So it was free? The pop-up store was free, or people would actually buy
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, people could pre-order, but the thing was they didn't make sales the point of the pop-up store.
Yeah, they made
The
learning.
point was the learning,
Yes.
and getting people to interact with the app to hear qualitatively what kind of concerns they had.
Yeah, awesome. So but the technology for actually scanning your face, was that something that at one point that was an idea? Did they validate that one as well? Did they?
Yeah, they probably spent too much time on that idea part of it, right? Because they make the tech work, but then if people don't trust it or there's no business model, you still kind of overall fail, right?
Right.
So we have these themes in the book from design thinking of desirable, viable, feasible.
Yes.
If you spend all your time in feasibility making sure the tech works, but people don't trust it,
Yeah.
you fail. Or if people trust it and you can't make money, you still fail, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Awesome. So basically, pop-up stores. That's one of the 44. Is that?
Yeah, and then some of the others, other end of the spectrum, some global insurance companies are in the book. American Family Insurance is in there, where they talk about, they want to do insurance for farmers. But, how do you test that? How do you get to farmers, by the way? Like, you drive up to their farm? I mean, it's sometimes Google ads, Facebook, Twitter isn't always the way to your customer. And so what they ended up doing, although they tried that stuff, they went into like conventions where farmers were, and they had brochures that explain the offering, the value prop, and they use that with a call to action in their conversations with farmers. So it's really interesting, when you work with companies that have been around for a long time, that have an established brand.
Yes.
They can also use these techniques.
Right.
It's just
Right.
you just have to be mindful about it and not do things that damage or destroy your brand while you're trying to test out these new ideas.
Right. And did you talk in here about off-brand testing and stuff like that?
A little bit. Basically, I have a little flow chart in there, but I've worked with some companies out here in the Bay Area where, we essentially said, we don't want to put our brand on this right away.
Yeah.
We could do a little like powered by here at the bottom, but we
Right.
just wanted to see,
Yeah.
is this stand on its legs at all before we throw our branding behind it?
Right.
And the ones that worked, we brought on brand. The
Yeah.
ones that didn't, we just killed and they went away and nobody cared because they didn't solve a real problem anyway.
Okay, awesome. I love catalogs of stuff because it just draws me in, and I'm seeing what you're talking about. These stories, they map directly to your 44, instruments, if you will, or experiments.
Yeah, and so we've categorized them by theme, so desirable, viable, feasible.
Yes.
A big learning for me writing the book was I thought I can neatly just say, here are all your desirability and your viability and your feasibility. Of course, that didn't work.
No, there's overlap.
Because you could do, if you did a concierge,
Yes.
you could be testing price with it. You could be testing demand, like desirability, does it solve a need? You could also be testing, can you do it, by manually going through it because you're manually delivering it to somebody.
Yeah.
So it could do all three. So we had to rearrange the book in a way where the themes matter, but it's also, it's more categorized around discovery and validation. But overall, we just try to give people options of what to choose when they have a certain kind of risk.
It's really interesting. I mean, this is very valuable. So, again, I really appreciate it. We, in Industrial Logic, we make our own little products every now and then, and we put stuff out there and we see what happens. We've done a lot of concierge MVPs. So, just a whole lot of back-end processing by hand to give some data to a customer and say, would this be interesting to you in the future? Sometimes I found we have killed an experiment prematurely. And what I've learned sometimes is it has nothing to do with the evidence. It has to do with people in the company wanting to do their own agenda sometimes. And that is a really interesting thing I hadn't been thinking about too much, because we're about to resurrect something we killed about 5 years ago. And we're going, that probably, we're seeing a need for it right now with our customers. Yeah. We saw the need 5 years ago. Somewhere we killed it, and as I look back, I'm like, yeah, that's when a certain person was here and he wanted to do something totally different.
Yeah, sometimes the market changes too. Maybe we should say park instead of kill.
Yeah.
I don't know, because sometimes I work with
the
team, the tech just won't be there, and we had some fit, but it was like, no, and so maybe we kill it, but at the same time, I remember reaching out to these people years later on this one team and saying, hey, remember that thing we killed? it looks like Apple's doing this now. Like, maybe we should bring it back. So sometimes, but agendas certainly play a part because, if you're just going to test it and set the bar really low just so you can build it anyway, you have to be careful of that for sure.
Right. That's not real testing.
It's not experiment, but you can't fail.
Right. So you're into evidence-based, like, let's really get evidence. This is a book for people that want evidence. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, or at least, I hate to say data-driven, but at least they're data-influenced.
Okay, so that always brings up this concept of what about intuition?
Yeah.
How does intuition play in to something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of training your intuition, but you also have a vision, you have an idea. So where the book starts and stops, it's very much, I didn't make an ideation book about where ideas come from. It's I have an idea, how do I shape it and test it? So having a big vision, I think, still is a major part of this.
Yeah.
But then being open to testing that vision against reality and then shaping it, because you may end up in a different segment or with a different solution. And I think so many of these success stories we see and we read in Wired, and all, we've kind of whitewashed the history of, that started off as a game before it became, like Flickr, right? It's like, this thing started off as something completely different, but then they ended up being really successful over here. And that's a very winding journey. So
yes.
I do. Intuition plays a part. Vision plays a big part too. Yeah. And it's not just a spreadsheet where whatever the numbers show, you just go that way. You do have to have some balance for sure.
Got it. So thinking back to like a company like Zappos, when they first started selling shoes, would that be, how would you map that to one of these experiments or to multiples of them?
It's really interesting because that story, it gets mapped to so many different kinds of experiments over time. Yeah. But really what he did was behind the scenes, like, I'm literally going to go purchase these and ship them, right?
Yeah.
And
he took photos of them. He took photos of them at an actual shoe store and said, hey, is that okay? I'll buy them if people buy them online.
I think it's really interesting because it comes back to, okay, when he delivers those shoes to people, is it a white glove, obvious he's delivering this, or is it more behind a digital curtain where it seems like, I just ordered the shoes and they showed up? And I think that's where you can start thinking about, like a boomerang test, and also concierge and Wizard of Oz and all these different types.
Yeah.
I try not to get too wrapped up in the types, but what you learn from that experience, I do think is slightly different if he hand delivers shoes to you versus it's never really sure if he's doing that behind the scenes and you're just getting the shoes you want. And so I do think...
it's also like a pop-up store too, right? Because he kind of just threw up this website, didn't really have anything, but he had a way to provide it.
One thing I have taken, though, in consideration with that story and stories like that is sometimes people say, you just take a picture of a website and then you throw your brand on it and then you test it. And I feel like maybe I'm biased, but the companies I work with, that's a great way to get sued. Like if you just took LinkedIn or Payless or whatever and threw your logo and say, this is my store now, there's something, I feel like I really want people to test ideas, but at the same time, I do want us to have a moral compass.
Right.
And I am really sensitive to this anyway now because of like fake news and everything else that's going on in the world.
Sure.
So I, in the book, do explicitly say, like, please don't just take a site and throw your logo on it and say it's your site now.
Right, just to see how it does,
you could certainly take customers and point them at that site and do competitive testing.
Right.
That I'm fine with because you're literally like pointing customers to it and watching how they behave with it. But there's something not quite right with me when I see people say, well, I'm just going to take that my logo and put it on. It's...
Yeah, I find it as well. Like the motto used to be, know thy customer, and that means get to know your customer, right? Which we would say is probably a good thing, except that some companies go way too far, right? And you've closed the app, and they're still tracking your location, or stuff like that, where it's like, no, you've gone way too far about knowing the customer here.
Yeah, I put a page in here, a spread where we talked about ethics, right? And we say. Basically, don't be evil. Like, I don't know, like probably like you, my first startup I joined was in the 90s, .com craze, but there was this term like vaporware that kept coming up time and time again. But the problem with that was people selling stuff they had probably no intention of ever building. And I don't want to recreate that atmosphere, today. I want to say, look, before you jump to build, which is what we do too often, can we just test our way through this to make sure we're even on the right track?
Right.
And I do think that's different than saying, I'm going to try to take advantage of people. And so I do try to call that out in the book. And then things like fake testimonials on pages and things like, okay, maybe there was a time where startups just felt like that's how I get customers, but now I'm like, should you really be putting fake testimonials on your page? Like, even if anything, you're biasing people signing up because they see a bunch of fake people that signed up. Like, it's we got to be careful with the techniques. Is probably what I'm trying to say.
Makes great sense. I guess the build trap, right? Melissa Perry's book. She's also obviously saying, don't just go build stuff. This is a wonderful guide to helping you not waste a lot of time and energy, right? Building things that no one wants.
Yeah, I've worked at a couple startups that did that, and that's probably why I'm really biased. Because if you've lived through that, you don't really want to go through that again. Nights and weekends, sleeping on my desk at a startup, building stuff that nobody cared about, and it didn't matter how beautiful it looked. I'm trying to help people learn from my mistakes in that regard.
Well, we've all done this. I mean, every one of us, and it sort of relates to Modern Agile's principle of make safety a prerequisite. That is something that we say, it's a prerequisite, meaning you have to have thought about it beforehand. Think about how could you de-risk things. Like this seems a lot about risk management to me.
It is. I think also can leaders create an environment where it's safe to work this way?
Yes.
So if they say experiment but don't fail, then that's not a safe environment where you can actually go back and work through this and decrease risk and uncertainty. So I do think what I'm trying to give leadership is a little more awareness of you need to create an environment where this kind of work can flourish. Because otherwise you design a team, they have all the right behaviors, but if they're in an environment where they're not allowed to work this way or they can't get to the customer, it's going to stall out and fail. So I think coming back to Modern Agile, I think this environment design, safety goes really hand in hand with experimentation because again, it's not an experiment if it can't fail or if you're not allowed to fail. It's really pulls at that thread of what's leadership and culture look like in your company.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is so great because experiment and learn rapidly. Now we can point to a book like this and just go, have that book because that's clearly in there. But you're saying it's in the other quadrants as well. Safety, don't waste time building stuff no one wants, and create a culture that enables this type of thing. So talk about delivering value continuously. Is that a factor to this? Do you think of that factoring in?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an element of rapid experimentation here. And so let's say you did like an experiment a week. That doesn't mean you get a phase and you stop. And then you just deliver. Like, there's some, I tell people a capacity plan for this kind of work, and the percent should never be zero. So you should be delivering value, but also testing when someone says, hey, this new feature I want. And you're like, what's the job behind that feature? And can you help explain the why? Instead of just adding that feature to the backlog and delivering it, right? So, and then I think also making people awesome, it really taps into people's creativity. So you go to your team and you say, how would we test this? And you give them space to actually be creative and do that. It's amazing what happens because these folks often aren't allowed to be creative or aren't given space to do it.
Who is that? So who does that? Who would you say are the people that are empowered to do the experimentation?
Well, I still come back to Agile with regards to having product design and technology leadership in the mix to help create an environment where this can happen. And so I push it down onto the team for the most part and say, all right, team, there's stuff in your backlog you're worried about. How do we go test that? And rather than have them just kind of not talk about it and keep delivering stories, which can feel kind of like a feature factory in extent or a hamster wheel. And
So it could be the whole team. It could be anyone's empowered to do this testing.
Yeah, I recommend I be careful with the whole dual track Agile with creating a little discovery team that only does this work. I try to rotate people through it.
Because a good developer, I mean, developers are smart, testers are smart, lots of smart people, analysts are smart. People can learn to test business ideas, right?
And you're probably going to need multiple people in the experiment anyway. Developers take amazing notes, so pair them with somebody conducting an interview, and just rotate that through. They don't feel empowered to have to conduct it, but they can take amazing notes, and they get that context. So there are all kinds of creative ways where you can kind of share it.
And the team. And if let's say I'm not a big fan of the term product owner, but let's say product management if they're coming with potential ideas to implement, if they're not aware of these things, then they wouldn't even know some technique for like quickly experimenting and maybe invalidating the idea. So they really need to know this stuff. And
They do.
If a developer comes along and says, "Did you know we could actually test that before we build it?" Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think what I'm seeing inside companies is they're just giving this book to product people and saying, look, we need to read this. Any new product person we hire needs to read it, just so we're aware of what we have available.
So what is the biggest challenge in terms of becoming good at this?
It's biases. It's almost always biases. If you want to do it anyway, you're going to weed out stuff that contradicts what you want to do. So I give some tips in the book to say, please do this stuff in groups. Like here are some traps to look out for. Some of the ones we see in Agile, take on too many things at once. A bunch of long running things that never finish properly. We bake our biases right into it. So a lot of this stuff, we could take what we learned from Agile and apply it here and like put a WIP limit on how many experiments we have running, make sure we finish, learn, and feed that learning back in. But yeah, it's like you can make it through the loop once. The biggest challenge is like, how do you do it multiple and keep going? And it takes time.
So this is very different from just giving the team user stories. This is saying, we have this idea, we think this would be useful, but we're open-minded to maybe learning that it's not, or that it is, and we have evidence that it is. So very different from saying, go build this.
Yes.
Yeah. That's to me, that's more modern style Agile versus the old days of here's the backlog of user stories, go build it in two-week increments.
Yeah, so I want people to have a healthy skepticism of the work. If you look at that user story and you say, have we ever talked to that user? Do we have any idea that this is what they want? Is this good for us to do as a company? Is this aligned to our vision? Can we do, I feel like sometimes with Agile, we only focus on the can we question, feasibility.
Right.
And we're great at that. We're great at taking something and saying, can we break this down and build it? But I think we also need to think about who it's for and can we actually make this sustain? And those are tests we can run too.
Right. So you have the test cards and the learning cards. Can you say more about those?
Yeah, we're just building off, so Alex Osterwalder and myself, my co-author, we're just building off a lot of the great work he's already done.
Yes.
So value prop canvas, business model canvas, test cards, learning cards, using things to frame how you're going to run through this exercise and bounce from like strategy to tests and then back and forth.
So the business model canvas has been around the longest, I guess, and that had a huge impact. And then it was followed with the value proposition work.
Yep.
Yeah. And then how does that factor into your assumption mapping?
So basically, one of the challenges I see with people when they have canvases is they're not sure what to do next with it.
Right.
And in the previous books, we said like stack rank, but basically what I said is write down your assumptions, like we believe that, ... Do a 2x2 exercise, which is assumptions mapping, which is something I learned from Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden, which I just folded design thinking into it. And I played with the labels over the years with teams. And do a 2x2 of those things you just wrote down. Where's your risk? Is it desirability risk, viability risk, feasibility risk? And then what kind of experiments would you map to that to go run to learn about the risk? So surveys are great, interviews are great, but they don't always generate the learning that you need. And so we were just trying to fill in that gap between here are canvases and here are experiments people want to run, but how do you actually focus on the most important thing? So yeah, very much canvas, 2x2 experiment. That's the flow.
Very simple. Yeah. Very, very good. Well, gosh, this has been awesome. So this book is basically now available on Amazon and everywhere else.
It's been out for a month, trending one in entrepreneurship and economics right now. So I'm very excited about that. So it's been received pretty well.
And so this is actually useful, again, for software people, but also people who aren't in the software field. People building glasses for folks and making all kinds of products.
My favorite experience right now is people ask me what I do. I say I help test business ideas, and they go, I got a business idea. I happened at the dentist last week. It happens everywhere. So it's really interesting. It's not a lack of ideas, but what do you do with that idea? And I hope this book kind of helps people take it forward and figure it out.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on your second appearance, and congratulations again on this wonderful new book, Testing Business Ideas. Go out and buy it. Thanks again, and hope to have you back another time.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this edition. Please share it with friends. Talk about the Modern Agile Show and share it out wide. We're coming here regularly with awesome speakers and writers and thinkers to bring you some of the gems from the Agile and Lean field. Thanks again for watching.